welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 439, and today's date is August 12th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Central Bankers, U.S. Government are now preparing for bail-ins. Now, we talk about bail-ins quite a bit, and we understand, as of right now, Canada, United States, England, European nations blessed by Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and other countries do have bail-in documents. They are getting prepared to pretty much go in, take your money. I call it Cyprus. Just like it happened in Cyprus, one day the people woke up and guess what? The banks were closed down. Nobody knew what was going on. They all ran to the bank, and right there and then they were told, well, banks are closed, we're under capital controls, you cannot take out your money, and we need some of your money to keep these banks operating. And what we'll do is we'll give you some bank stock, the worthless bank stock, because the banks are collapsing, so we'll just exchange your currency for the worthless bank stock. And the people had no choice but to pretty much say, okay. And they said, don't worry. The government says it's only going to be about 8 to 10%. That's all we need. And then eventually what we found out, on average, it was about 47%. This is what we're going to see here in the United States, the European Union, Canada, Australia. This is why governments go ahead and create these types of documents. Actually, it's the central bankers / governments and the agencies that do create this. Now, the one that's created here in the United States is the FDIC and Bank of England, and they decided to create this together, and it is on the site, on the X22report.com site. You can take a look at it. It's under Resources Documents, and we can see right now that they are preparing. They are getting ready. They have already done tests to see if they're able to do the bail-ins. Do they work? And guess what? Yes, they do. And they are going to push this forward once the economy starts collapsing. And this is why they have this. You don't create something unless you're going to use it later on, because they know what's going on. They understand this whole entire system's collapsing. There's no question in their mind. They absolutely know it. The people that don't know it are the people who are sleeping around the country, who think everything is fine. They believe the illusionary numbers and the economy's getting better because they believe the rhetoric from the president, who's out there on his campaign trail telling you that, everything's fine, we're in a recovery, look at the people that have jobs. Yeah, they're making half the salary, and they can barely get by, but they got jobs. But we can see right now that all of this is completely fake. It's phony, and these people are going to get really hurt because they're going to wake up one day and they're going to realize all their money that they saved up, that they kept in the bank, they cannot take this out. And you have to remember, Cyprus were under capital controls for a year, and I still believe they still can't take out money, but they can transfer from bank to bank inside the country. I don't know if they're able to transfer outside of the country just yet. I know that was in place, and I don't know if they removed that restriction because they didn't want, of course, the money leaving the country. Well, that's what's going to happen here, and it's going to take people by surprise, and this is when you see things going pretty much south because people are not going to know what's going on, and of course they're going to get very upset for those people who have a lot more money in the bank accounts than what's insured, and they're going to say, wait a minute, you're taking my money and you're giving me what? And this is a hard thing to swallow when you don't understand what's been going on around the world. And these people are going to be angry. They're going to be pissed off. And we might see riots because of this. Now, all of this is going to be intertwined into some type of an event. It's not just going to come up one day and say, hey, we're in a collapse, and all of a sudden they're going to have bail-ins. No, they need to create this event so all eyes are shifted from the central bank and the U.S. government, and it is moved on to another country or group. And this is exactly what they're doing at this point. This is why you see the provoking around the world. This is why you see all these events that are occurring right now, because they are laying the groundwork for this to occur. And when it does, it's going to really take people by surprise. Now, out in France, what we are seeing And we've known this for quite a while, because if we go back to 2013 when we had that false flag attack in Syria, the French president was out there telling everyone that we're in this fantastic recovery. Oh, just believe me, we're in a recovery. And we had the Eurozone out there saying, yes, we're in a recovery. And of course, the United States at the time was saying the same exact thing, and they're continually still saying the same thing, because they are waiting for that event. Now, at that point, back in 2013 of August, they thought they were going to go to war, and this was going to cover it up, and eventually Russia would join in, and China would join in, and the whole thing completely fell apart. So what we're seeing right now is we're at the end game right now. The real economic indicators across the world, not just here in the United States, are completely imploding on themselves. Right now, the GDP for second quarter will be released on Thursday in France, and it does not look good at all. Now, of course, they can fudge the numbers and say, all right, we had to quickly, manipulate these numbers to make them look good, but I don't think they're going to do that this time. Industrial production declined in the second quarter, foreshadowing a very low GDP growth. All major industry sectors experienced a decline in their production, and building continues to dive. Housing starts are at their lowest for 15 years, a shortfall of about 0.4% of GDP this year. France is not alone in Europe. Italy is also having a very rough time, and they're completely falling back into a recession / depression, I would call this. And we also know that Cyprus, Greece, Portugal, and many other countries are starting to really feel the brunt of this depression coming on, and Germany's feeling it, UK is feeling it, and of course the corporate media, the US government, the Eurozone, they're going to be out there telling you that this is all because of these sanctions that Russia placed on all these countries, about these food bans, and this is why the economies are starting to hurt. Well, they just implemented the food bans. They can't hurt the economy right away. It doesn't work like that. A day later, after the food bans, they're telling us that, oh, look, see, the economies are starting to implode on themselves, and it's all because of Russia. No, this was happening for a long time now, and this is why we report this over and over every day, so people understand exactly what has been going on throughout the year. So it's not like, oh, Russia did something and 2 days later the European economy is falling apart and now the United States economy is falling apart. No, we've been leading up to this point, so they can't bring in another factor to say, oh, this is the reason. We know what the reason is, because the people have no jobs. The countries are in a huge amount of debt, and we have major, major problems in the economy. Retail is suffering. Housing is suffering. The unemployment is really not 6.2%. It's closer to 30. Some people say it's 37%. So we can see at this point from all of this reporting that this Russian sanction on food has pretty much nothing to do with the economy's falling. Yes, will it speed it up a little bit? Yes, it will, but it's not the major cause. The major cause is the central bankers. They're the ones who have been imploding the economy. Now, of course, the United States is out there and the Fed is out there saying that they see no inflation growth whatsoever. But those people who go out and do shopping, who fill up their car, definitely see prices going up. I have 4 children. We go out and we buy in bulk, and I see prices going up all the time. But what's very interesting is that people don't even realize that those people haven't been out to the markets or been out there, and they really haven't really looked at the products, but you see the products shrinking. Companies are shrinking package sizes while keeping the prices unchanged. And another way they can give you less for your money is to dilute the product by replacing expensive ingredients with cheaper ones, such as water. For example, a sharp-eyed surveyors can spot actual price increases or changes in package sizes, but few are on the lookout for product dilution. And people don't even see this, that they replace ingredients like tuna is not really tuna. They replaced it with a different fish, and coffee beans, they swap out different coffee beans, and they do this to a lot of products. Several popular detergents don't clean efficiently as they used to unless you use more of them, and pretty much what they've done is water it down. Foods are also subject to this type of manipulation. Chickens might have fluid pumped into them to increase their weight, and thus selling at the pretty much same price, but you're getting less of the product. Ice cream, of course, can be watered down to the point where it can no longer use the word cream in its name. And we've also seen, I think it's Breyer's ice cream has pretty much went from a half gallon, and they shrunk their product while keeping the price the same. So there is inflation. The companies are just covering it up because they realize everything's getting more expensive, so they need ways of cutting corners and making sure the public is not aware of what's really going on. Now, in the housing market, we are definitely seeing things starting coming to a screeching halt because we understand we're in August right now. We are coming out of the hot season. Most of the people who have children would like to be in their homes before school starts. This way they can sign them up and have them go to the schools in their district. And what we're seeing now is things are starting to slow. Home price gains are pretty much leveling off and falling in the second quarter. And what we're seeing right now is that the median price fell from a year earlier in 47 of 173 metropolitan areas measured, the National Association of Realtors said in a report. So we can see right now that prices are starting to fall, and they're going to pick up speed as we exit the summer. Now, we understand that most Americans are pretty much tapped out. We understand back in 2013 when President Obama was in Arizona, letting everyone know that the housing recovery is in full swing. And at that time I reported that Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and many other mortgage companies were laying off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage departments. The reason for this is because people were not taking out mortgages, and ever since that point in time, we've tracked the mortgage applications and refinance applications, and they've been declining all throughout the year. And this is a sign that the American people are not buying homes right now. And what they're saying is first-time purchases accounted for 28% of all sales of previously owned homes in June, down from 40% historically, according to the National Association of Realtors. The contrast is starker in the new housing market, where home builders are focusing on move-up buyers. In May, home builders reported that only 16% of new home purchases were made by first-time buyers, the lowest in 15 years. And what they're blaming it on, and some of it's right, is tight credit has made it more difficult for young buyers who have relatively high unemployment, weak wage growth, and lower credit scores. And that is all absolutely right. And this is really starting to pick up now, and you can see that the housing market is starting to crumble and fall apart. And even the corporate media is starting to realize this, that things do not look good right now. Now, Fed Vice Chair Fisher, he was out there saying that the United States is now preparing for bank bail-ins. The United States is preparing a proposal to require systematically important banks to issue bail-in long-term debt that will enable insolvent banks to recapitalize themselves in a resolution without calling on government funding. This cushion is known as a gone concern buffer. Fisher's comments that the U.S. is preparing a proposal for bail-ins is at odds with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and Bank of England officials who have said that the bail-in legislation could be used today. The U.S. already has in place for bail-ins in the event of bank failing. Indeed, the U.S. has conducted simulation exercises with the U.K. in 2013 and again this year. FDIC officials in charge of planning for the resolutions and the Bank of England's Deputy Governor Paul Tucker both confirmed that the U.S. system is ready to handle a big bank collapse. So what does this tell you? They're ready. They know it's coming. They realize the event that they've been planning on is here. This is why we see all of these flashpoints all around the world. This is why the United States government is not letting up in provoking a war. They want this event. They need this event. They need it to cover up this entire economic collapse. And like I said in my other reports, when this does occur, this is going to hit the United States very, very hard. And of course, it's going to be done in a way that people don't realize that it's actually collapsing because of the way the economy is. They're going to believe that it is from another country or group, because when another country or group hits the financial institutions with some type of cyber attack and shuts down the stock market and the NASDAQ and the S&P, and by the way, they all have kill switches, just to stop it just in time to then build it up again. But they realize they need these kill switches because they can't let it completely drop out, because they need to show everyone that the central banks have come in and saved the day. So they'll stop the market at a certain point. They'll come in, start pumping it up again, making it look like they are really saving the day here. But when all this is happening, they're going to say, well, listen, we don't know the extent of the damage. We need to close the banks. We need to put capital controls in effect. And we see that they've siphoned off millions upon or billions of dollars from the banks, and we need to recapitalize them. And the U.S. government and other governments around the world are not going to, bail them out. So we need to go inside of the banks right now and take your money. But don't worry. We have these beautiful pieces of paper. They say stock of the bank here, and we're just going to place these in your account while we take out your hard-earned money. And don't worry, later down the road, we'll repay this, and we will buy that stock back from you. And this is not going to happen. And of course, they're going to say they're only taking about 8%, and then later on, it'll turn out to be about 50% of the bank accounts that they've taken to keep these banks operating. So we can see from this point on, we are heading down that path, and they are ready to go. Now, in regards to Obamacare, what we're seeing here is about 300,000 people that signed up on Obamacare on the exchange, on the website, or called it in, might lose their insurance because they don't have certain information that is required. And a lot of the information that's missing is, immigration status and their citizenship. How interesting. 300,000 people. Actually, there was 1 million people, and it looks like 400,000 people cleared this up, but there's 300 people that are outstanding right now. Now, we understand that the borders are wide open, illegals are coming in, and Obama would love to get these people on Obamacare, and it's just very interesting how when a required question was supposed to be answered, 300,000 people had a problem answering it. Well, could this be that, they had illegals signing up to boost the numbers up? It kind of looks that way. Now, it looks like the riots are continuing in Ferguson, and it is not getting better there. It's actually getting worse. Violence has broken out again as authorities dressed in riot gear in St. Louis, Missouri. Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson told the Associated Press that a group gathered throughout the day on Monday at a burned-out convenience store. Then they turned rowdy at nightfall, and they had to fire tear gas, and they were also firing wooden bullets at the demonstrators, and they were firing at anybody. Those people who were just passing by were getting hit with these wooden bullets, and it left huge welts on them, and it was bleeding in that area. Now, the FBI is allegedly, I should say, taking over the investigation, and this should worry every single person out there, because every time the FBI takes over anything, we see false flag events or agent provocateurs getting into the mix here. Now, of course, the FBI is saying, no, we're not getting involved with this, so there's a little confusion, and I think they're actually really getting involved in this. And what's happening is the FBI is coming in, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are more agent provocateurs around the country in this area to start some type of rioting going on. And they see they have the spark right now, and they might want to fan the flames here and really build this up. And this way, once this gets to a point, the Obama administration could declare martial law in the country. And what's very interesting right now is that the FAA banned flights over Ferguson under 3,000 feet. So there's nothing allowed over that area. So we can see something is in the works. We're going to have to keep track of this as we go further down into August and see if other areas are starting to break out in riots. And then once this happens, we know this is what they're trying to do. Now, it looks like in California, this kill switch bill is getting ready to go live. I think it's heading towards the governor's desk, and he just has to sign it. Of course, they're saying that this is going to be used to stop criminals from stealing the smartphones, and this will really, stop this, crime syndicate going on. And of course, Apple and HTC and Samsung, they've already agreed to put kill switches in there. There's also legislation in the United States government, the federal government, in Congress, saying that they're trying to pass a smartphone theft prevention act, which will allow kill switches in all cell phones. Now, I truly believe that kill switches are already inside of every one of these cell phones already, and it looks like they're trying to pass this legislation to make it legal, because you have to remember, if you go back to the Boston bombing, at that time period, what they did is they shut down all the cell towers, and they thought they would be able to stop those pictures going out. But what happened was people were still taking pictures of what was going on, showing the evidence that, hey, this person, the insignia on the black bag matched, black water and all that kind of stuff. And they thought, oh, good, we can contain this. We didn't have pictures going out. And as soon as the cell towers went on, all of a sudden everyone started to transmit all their pictures to all their friends and to everywhere, and it got out all over the internet. And then they realized we have a major problem, and this is why they asked everyone to turn in their pictures, so this way they can see what they're working with to make up their story that the brothers were the cause of the Boston bombing at that time. Okay, now Japan right now, they are about to test a homegrown stealth fighter jet. This is the first test of this jet, and a group of major Japanese firms are planning to test flight next year for the nation's first homegrown stealth fighter jet. The conservative government has been looking to expand Japan's military influence, and you have to remember they built their first warship since World War II. They're building other warships, and this is all in preparation for the war that is coming, the escalation of the South China Sea area, and you can see they're continually doing this. This is why they were changing the constitution. They didn't want to be a pacifist nation, and every single country is gearing up for war, and they're preparing for it. Each stage that they do, you can see they are definitely preparing for what is coming. Now, we understand that Russia has placed sanctions on pretty much the Western world, and they stopped all food imports. And a lot of countries are feeling the strain of these sanctions, and they're worrying right now. And Poland, they have huge amount of apples, and Poland is the leading exporter of apples in Europe, and they don't know what to do with them. So they asked the United States, listen, can you please buy our apples? Now, I don't know, the United States hasn't answered yet. They went to Belarus, and they said, listen, can you buy our apples? We have all these apples. We're losing a lot of profits. A lot of people are going to be out of work. We need someone to buy these apples. So they're in talks right now with Belarus. Now, about 800 Finnish dairy workers are going to be furloughed because of these sanctions that Russia imposed. And the largest Finnish producer of dairy products will involuntarily furlough part of its workforce from its factories that produces exports to Russia. And we can see already, and I've said this before, as these agricultural exporters lose business, we're going to see many more people unemployed. When we see more people unemployed, that means people aren't spending. This means the country isn't bringing in revenue to pay off the debt, and this means we're having a escalated collapse scenario coming up, and this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Now, Austrian gardeners say Russia-EU food import ban is a catastrophe for Europe. And they're saying no good can come from this, and all what they're saying is this is going to really hurt the EU economy. And I completely agree. It's going to bring down the economies much faster than they were going, and it's really going to speed up the collapse. The collapse was already in the works. This is just helping it along right now. Now, Belarus might have a chance to double its cheese exports to Russia. Belarus has an opportunity to double its cheese exports to Russia. Belarus has a perfect chance to export 200,000 tons of cheese instead of the current 100,000 tons. So this is working out well for Belarus and many of the other BRIC nations, where they're really beefing up their exports to Russia. They're seeing increased sales now, and it's just becoming better off for them, and the Western countries are really starting to hurt now. Now, a couple things are happening with this humanitarian convoy into Kiev. First, Kiev said, absolutely not. We're not letting you in. This is a cover-up. You have military assets inside the trucks. You have missile systems inside the trucks. And the convoy of 280 trucks were dispatched. They went to the border, and they said, you know what? We want all trucks unloaded, and then we're going to reload them onto different trucks and bring them into the country. And that kind of fell apart, and they said, okay, we looked inside the trucks, and what we're seeing is about 1,800 tons of relief supplies, including power generators, foodstuffs, water, baby food, medical supplies, and sleeping bags. And guess what? There's no military assets. Now, the Ukraine had more demands, as they were saying that, they're not using the correct convoy route, they weren't approved, they were using so many different excuses, but eventually what has happened, Moscow said, listen, we'll agree to any terms, we need to get this humanitarian aid in there, so whatever you want us to do, let's just do it. So Ukraine has decided against reloading the relief supplies from Russian humanitarian convoy. Moscow has agreed with all Kiev's suggestions regarding the humanitarian mission to the southeast of Ukraine and corrected the convoy route. We have agreed to the route that is comfortable to the Kiev authorities. We have agreed to have Ukrainian license plates on our trucks during their movement in Ukraine. We have agreed to take on not only representatives of the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, aboard the trucks, but also representatives of the Ukraine authorities. So they wanted all these things done, and they said, go ahead, we'll do it. Let's just get this to the people. And it seems like the trucks now are moving towards the people. Now, out in Yemeni, it looks like things are really escalating, just like in Libya and Lebanon. The tribes in Yemen are really starting to advance. The Yemeni president vowed on Monday a relentless fight against al-Qaeda insurgents. And of course, the al-Qaeda insurgents are the tribes and the people rising up, saying, you know what, we want our country back, and we want the private Western central banks out of here, and we want the puppet government out there. And the United States considers the al-Qaeda in Yemen one of the most dangerous wings of the militant network founded by Osama bin Laden. No, there's just a lot more people in there. They're making headway inside the country, taking over more areas, and this is why we've been seeing huge amount of drone attacks in Yemen. So we can see right now Yemen is the tribes there are fighting back, they are pushing, and now the government is speaking out because they realize what's happening. The government in Libya is hiding in a corner, and the tribes in Libya are taking back their country. And of course the Islamic State was trying to slip into Lebanon to create chaos there, but it looks like the villagers have chased them out, and the tribes in Lebanon are really starting to rise up now. Now it looks like Maliki's support is eroding, and it looks like he might be completely out right now. And the U.S. Secretary John Kerry urged the Prime Minister designate al-Abadi to work quickly to form an inclusive government, and said that the U.S. is prepared to offer Iraq significant additional aid in the fight against the Islamic State. Now, we understand there's the Islamic State inside Iraq, which is controlled by the United States government, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations, and we also have the tribes inside of Iraq that are rising up, and I believe this is who they're really fighting. They wanted Maliki out of there. He was backed by Russia, and of course, all the way up until May, they were backing Maliki, and then all of a sudden, they were like, no way, we don't want him here. We want a new puppet regime inside of Iraq that will completely go along with what whatever we say, and it looks like they got that. And we can see right now Obama is out there saying that the Iraqi people named a new president. Today the president named a new prime minister. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. Now the Pentagon is out there and they're saying that these airstrikes on the Islamic State are going to have really no impact whatsoever. Actually, they don't even make sense in what they're doing. And of course, we know this is not to hit the Islamic State. This is all for show, to try to get the United States involved in Iraq, and also to remove Maliki. And also, yes, they're protecting the oil fields from the tribes, and this is why they had to lay down air support inside there, and this is why they're supplying a lot of weapons to the Kurds right now. And we can see all of this, a lot of it is for show, to make everyone believe that the Islamic State is crazy. They're out there beheading and slicing and dicing, and you really have to ask yourself, what reporters are actually following the Islamic State around to get all this information? Where are they? Now, a former U.S. diplomat was out there saying the U.S. media is playing the meme that the U.S. is worried about Christian minority in Iraq as a way to engorge the American people with blood, but the media fails to note that more than half of Iraqi Christians were killed or fled during the U.S. occupation. By launching airstrikes, the U.S. has gone all in on the side of Iraqi Shia and Kurds. You cannot bomb away a political movement. You cannot kill an idea that motivates millions of people with a Hellfire missile. And yes, the tribes are rising up inside of all these different countries, and this is their big problem. And this is why they sent the Islamic State in there, to create chaos, so you really don't know what's going on in Iraq. And I'm waiting for the United States government to do something in Libya. I'm waiting for them to have some type of special event of why they need to go in there, and they haven't done yet, but I'm sure it's right around the corner. Now the question is ISIS an existential threat? I mean, we have Peter King out there saying that, the Islamic State is coming to America. Lindsey Graham seeing the cities are burning. Feinstein's out there saying they're coming. And the question is, if ISIS gains are truly an existential threat to the Republic and our cities are about to go up in flames, why did these congressmen who are continually saying this, why didn't they demand that President Obama call back Congress from vacation to vote to authorize a new war on the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq? So think about that for a second. They're out there telling us how bad the Islamic State is. They're out there telling us that they're going to be hitting all the different areas around the world. They're going to be coming to the United States. So if this is such an important thing, why didn't they say, you know what, we need to recall Congress, we're in a very serious situation, and we need to vote on this, because guess what? The Islamic State is controlled by the United States, by Israel, by the UK, by other Arab nations. This is all planned. This is why you see this is why it's playing out the way it's playing out. They don't need Congress. They know exactly what's going on. And when the event occurs here, it's been set up for a long time. The digital time bombs that are waiting in the financial institutions, the malware that's waiting on the power infrastructure, the lone wolf groups that are already set up inside the United States, it's all been prepared from the beginning. They're just waiting for the green light to go. Now, the White House is having a very tough time, and it's failing to adequately explain to lawmakers the legal justification and concrete objectives for its airstrikes against the Islamic State. Questions are now being raised on Capitol Hill about how the White House intends to legally justify its military campaign, particularly in light of its efforts to repeal the authorization for use of military force in Iraq. The administration's decision to bypass Congress before taking military action is reminiscent of its behavior in Libya, where airstrikes also were authorized without congressional approval. And they're having a tough time explaining why they are bombing this area. Of course, they're bringing in that people are on the mountain, and all that's propaganda. This is all leading up to this, because you could see the way the central bankers work. Do they really care about the people, about humanitarian mission? No, they don't care about this whatsoever. You see in Ukraine, as long as they have control of the puppet regime, they don't care what happens to the people. The same thing's happening in Iraq. They don't care about the people. They're just using this for their agenda, and that's what they're doing. And this is why they're having a tough time explaining what they're actually doing. Now, the U.S. is going to consider more support for Iraq. John Kerry was out there saying that, yes, we're going to be sending in more political advisors to help out, but we won't be sending in more combat troops. Now, we have to take the opposite of this because we're seeing them continually sending more and more advisors, and a lot of these advisors look like military men going into battle, and they're continually creeping in more and more people with boots on the ground there. And of course, as soon as they come out and say, and of course John Kerry was out there saying that the U.S. is not going to have any more boots, they're not going to involve any more combat troops inside of Iraq, we have to think of the opposite of what's going on here. It seems like it's a mission creep where they're sending a little bit at a time now, and before you know it, we have boots on the ground and we're in an all-out war inside of Iraq, heading towards Syria. Now, of course, those new advisors that are going in now, they're calling them the Disaster Response Team. The U.S. Agency for International Development said in Washington on Monday the government has sent a Disaster Assistant Response Team to help coordinate the humanitarian aid being sent to Iraq. Now, they use all these different excuses just to get people inside of there. Now, it looks like the United States are getting ready to use drones again in Iraq, and they're going to use them to strike the Islamic State or the tribes inside of Iraq. So we can see the drone wars are on. Now, out in India right now, there's a warning that August 15th, they could have a major cyber attack on their country. Cybersecurity Division, NCIIPC, has alerted government departments and leading internet service providers about a possible cyber attack in India. It has been observed that Indian cyberspace traditionally comes under attack by adversaries on dates of national importance such as August 15th. So they're gearing up and protecting themselves, and we'll have to see how this plays out, and I believe the 15th is this Friday. Now on to Ebola. It seems like Ebola is allegedly spreading in Africa. We see the World Health Organization says 69 new Ebola cases reported in 4 nations, and we can see that they're saying that this is starting to spread now. China sent in workers to help out the situation, and it seems like those 8 Chinese nationals now are quarantined because they're saying they're showing some signs, or they're just quarantined to take precautions. Now, the Chinese government is stepping up its international humanitarian efforts in Africa, sending almost $5 million worth of medical supplies to 3 countries hardest hit by Ebola outbreaks: Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. And we can see, again, China has very close ties to all of these African nations. Now, the World Health Organization panel says it's ethical now to use the unproven Ebola drugs. The World Health Organization looking at 3 types of products to treat Ebola. They've also said hope there are more ZMapp doses by the end of the year. We don't make any choices on who's getting Ebola drugs. It's a market failure that no drug approved for Ebola. Now, of course, ZMapp is this wonder drug that all of a sudden they just happen to have, and now we have human subjects for them to test it on. Isn't that amazing how they had an Ebola breakout inside of Africa, and now they have the human subjects to test their vaccine. So we can see how this is all starting to play in right now. Now, I just wanted to go back to the CDC and the patent they have on Ebola. And we know the U.S., and this is coming out of global research, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control owns a patent on a particular strain of Ebola known as Ebola. Its patent number is CA2741523A1, and it was awarded in 2010. The government of the United States of America, as represented by the Secretary, Department of Health and Human Services, Center for Disease Control. The patent summary says the invention provides the isolated human Ebola virus, denoted as Ebola, deposited with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on November 26, 2007, and accorded an accession number 2007062991. It goes on to state the present invention is based upon the isolation and identification of a new human Ebola virus species, Ebola. Ebola was isolated from the patients suffering from the fever in a recent outbreak in Uganda. Ebola is not the same variant right now currently believed to be circulated in West Africa. So it's a different strain of Ebola right now. So this patent that everyone's talking about is for a completely different strain. Clearly, the CDC needs to expand its patent portfolio to include more strains of Ebola, and that may very well be why Americans with Ebola have been brought to the United States in the first place, because they can harvest Ebola from the victims to file patents. From the patent description on the Ebola virus, we know that the U.S. government extracts Ebola viruses from patients, claims to have invented that virus, files for monopoly patent protection on that virus. To understand why this is happening, you have to first understand what a patent really is and why it exists. A patent is a government-enforced monopoly that is exclusively granted to a person or organization. It allows that person or organization to exclusively profit from the invention or deny others the ability to exploit the invention for their own profit. So why would the U.S. government claim to have invented Ebola and then claimed an exclusively monopoly over its ownership? No medical reason to bring Ebola to the United States whatsoever. So why did they do this? Well, this patent may help explain that they brought these people here to help file for a new patent in this strain. And we can see who would be the winners of this. Well, ZMapp, because they would have a lock on the industry. And we can see that this whole entire thing is really scripted. I mean, just look at what's going on. We start to see the structure of the elaborate medical theater coming together right now. I mean, a global pandemic panic, a government patent, the importation of Ebola into a major U.S. city, an experimental vaccine, the rise of a little-known pharmaceutical company, and a public outcry for the FDA to fast-track the vaccine. So you can see how this is all being played out. And of course, the next act coming up, Act 2, will say that, that one day something will be broken, this strain of Ebola will break out, and everyone will call for this vaccine, and then they'll have everyone vaccinated. And they'll make huge amount of products, and again, we don't know what's inside this vaccine. Now, the U.S. is sending the untested Ebola drug to Liberia, and we can see right now they are going to test on humans in Liberia. And this is how they get around everything. They had an outbreak. Now they can test their drugs on actual humans. And it costs them pretty much nothing to do this. Now, here in the United States, we see that the borders are completely open. The president is telling us not to worry. And we could see something occur here in the United States. Now, am I saying it will happen? No, this could just be the first stage of it, to get the vaccine, to get the patent, to get the public brainwashed in a pandemic type of thought process that this could break out. And we could see this months later where all of a sudden it does break out and they have to declare a medical martial law and pretty much lock down everything. So we have many things happening and occurring all at once. We have the riots that are definitely picking up in Missouri. We see Ebola continually going and spreading throughout France, Spain, and other areas. Some countries are denying that it's spreading. We have cases here that people have been brought into the United States. So we can see right now, with all of this and more, everything is really starting to ramp up. And now they're trying to explain away why the economies are failing. And of course, they're blaming this on Russia. You can see right now, all of this is starting to collapse and come down, and they need a way to explain this. And The only way to do this is with some type of an event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.